What's up, everybody? This is Sam with SamShady Sports once again. Today I'm coming at you with a story of a former first round pick, Pro Bowler, first team All Pro, and co leader for forced fumbles in the NFL. May or may not be making a trip up north to the Canadian Football League. Let's get into who this is and how he'll transition to this Canadian Football League. Um, First of all, the name should ring a bell with anybody who's a football fan. It's Vic Beasley. He started off his career in football as a three-sport athlete in high school. He ran track, played basketball, and played on the football team, playing running back and linebacker. He racked up 120 carries for 878 yards, 7 touchdowns, adding 102 tackles, 12 for a loss, and 1 interception on defense as a linebacker as a senior. Um, as if that wasn't enough, Beasley was also found returning kicks and punts at times and added 3 more touchdowns on special teams, totaling 10 for the season. This stellar senior season ultimately garnered recognition at the college level, and he would receive scholarship offers from Stanford, Alabama, Auburn, and Clemson. Ultimately, he decided to choose Clemson. Clemson knew they were getting a very explosive player, but they also knew that he was kind of a positionless player coming out of high school, having played running back, having played linebacker, but not quite finding a home at either position. When he got to Clemson, they decided to redshirt him so he could go through a year of the collegiate weight program to hopefully add some strength and build towards what they thought was going to be a career as a tight end. He would work out as a redshirt freshman as a tight end and the scout team quarterback to simulate running quarterbacks they were facing throughout the year. Um, this is this was kind of an interesting decision to move him to tight end. I could see why they did it with the speed that he had and the prior background, having played offense at the high school level. Although I think he was more natural fit, as they quickly found out on the defensive side of the ball. He is the type of guy who had a quick first step and was always kind of going to be a natural pass rusher, although at the high school level he was used more as an inside linebacker that could flow from sideline to sideline. After his freshman season, he returned as a redshirt freshman and played very sparingly. And by very sparingly, I mean he got in on 16 snaps all year long, recording just 2 tackles. I think this kind of bothered him. Having been a three-sport athlete in high school, having been able to excel on many different levels at the high school level, he thought he was going to come into college and light the world on fire from day one. This obviously did not happen after 2 seasons at Clemson. He finally got the playing time he needed to burst on the scene like he had hoped to begin with in year 3 as a redshirt sophomore. He would go on to collect 18 tackles and 8 sacks as a situational pass rusher, ultimately earning a starting job for his junior season. His junior season was probably his best season at the collegiate level, and he would go on to collect 22 and a half sacks, 22 and a half tackles for a loss and 13 sacks over the season. Ironically, all 13 of his sacks came in the first 6 games of the season. As a senior, he regressed statistically slightly, logging just 8 sacks. However, he accomplished his goal that he set out toward when he returned as a senior and logged a career high for the School of Clemson with 29 sacks. The previous record had been 28, that was tied with 2 different players. This was a guy who was coming out of college who was definitely heralded as an NFL level talent, but prior to the combine, he was ranked as a potential second round pick. Then the combine rolled around and he went on to post monster numbers that drew attention of every GM in the league. At 6'3", 246 pounds, he ran a 4.53 40-yard dash, put up 35 reps of 225 pounds on the bench press, ran a sub 7-second three-cone drill at 6.91, and an impressive 41-inch vertical leap, again at 6'3", 246 pounds. This is unheard of, even at the NFL level. We have tremendous athletes at this level, but when a guy pops like this, it's without a doubt that he will be rocketing up draft boards, and that's exactly what happened in Beasley's case. He went from a potential second round pick to almost a lock in the top 15 of the draft, and he ultimately ended up a top 10 pick when Atlanta selected him 8th overall. When he originally joined the Falcons, they had him playing as a defensive end and just started him right out of the box as a defensive end, despite the fact that they knew he was undersized for the NFL level and that he had previous complaints about his ability to stand up against the run and his ability to shed blockers in the run game. Dan Quinn decided to live and die by his ability to rush the passer, and ultimately he basically was found dead due to his ability to rush the passer as a rookie. He collected just 4 sacks. Ultimately, not what anybody was hoping, and it was not an indication of things to come later in his career. He came back in 2016, and Dan Quinn decided that he was going to move him to what he used to call his Leo position in Seattle. This is the same type of linebacker hybrid defensive end role that we saw with Cliff Averill in Seattle, who ran it to perfection. And Beasley came in as arguably a better athlete with experience as a linebacker and would now stand up to rush the passer on a down to down basis. It ultimately benefited him tremendously in year 2. He would go on to be named a first team All Pro, named Pro Bowler, and tie for the league in forced fumbles with 6. He would put up 15.5 sacks, and he also scored a touchdown on a fumble recovery. So all in all, a pretty solid season and the exact type of season that Atlanta had hoped for when they drafted him 8th overall. With that in mind, they kept him at the linebacker position for the 2017 season, but his stats just weren't the same. He suffered an injury early in camp and ultimately would struggle to just 5 sacks in year 2. Following this, in year 3, or sorry, in year 4, he would move back to defensive end despite the fact that he had put up that monster season as strong side linebacker. After the move back to defensive end, it did not benefit him at all. His stats were almost identical to year 3 when he played his second season as a linebacker. I guess they didn't really lose anything by moving him back to defensive end, but they didn't gain anything by him not continuing to develop at a position that they had hoped that he would be able to fill long term. After moving back to defensive end, he had one solid season left in him before he left the Falcons. In 2019, he was able to collect 8 sacks and 42 tackles. This was a solid season, but this, again, was not what the Falcons were hoping for. And after the season, they announced that they would not resign him. In 5 seasons in Atlanta, he was able to collect 29, 37 and a half sacks, which it was okay, but it was definitely not what they had hoped drafting him 8th overall. Granted, I would argue that he was probably not put in the best position to succeed at the NFL level. I honestly think that strong side linebacker as a stand-up pass rusher and or as an outside linebacker in a 3-4 would have been his best position to play. Ironically, he's played more often than not with his hand in the dirt, which I still does not make any sense to me to this day. He's 6'3", 245 pounds to this day. He's never weighed over 250. Why do we have him playing with his hand in the ground in the NFL level? Does no coach realize this is a guy that should be bending the edge as a linebacker? But that's neither here nor there. He would move on to Tennessee in 2020, which I personally applauded because he would be moving on to a 3-4 defense. However, this is when things started going downhill for Beasley's NFL career. He signed a 1-year deal to kind of as a prove it deal with Tennessee, and he did not prove it. Things went south rather quickly. He began by not reporting to camp, and I think he chose to do this because of a previously undisclosed injury that Tennessee did not know about when they signed him. He finally reported on August 7th, only to be placed on the non-football injury list just 4 days later. He would go on to be activated by September 5th, roughly a month after he reported to the team, but he played in just 5 games and was ultimately released just 2 months later in November. He would go on to land on Las Vegas Raiders practice squad and be called up several times throughout the season prior to being activated to or elevated to the active roster in December. He would ultimately appear in just 5 games for the Raiders and 5 games for the Titans, racking up just 4 tackles and 1 forced fumble in 10 games. This was not what either Tennessee or Las Vegas had hoped, so neither of them chose to re sign him after the 2020 season, which is no surprise after the way his 2020 season began. What was a surprise is that no team took a chance on him for the 2021 season. He ultimately sat out entirely in 2021, and it's become apparent that NFL teams are simply not interested in bringing Vic Beasley back to the NFL currently. They would like to see him develop somehow, but yet nobody's giving him a chance. Well, Beasley's taken that matter into his own hands, and his name has now been added to the CFL negotiation pool for Ottawa. Ottawa has been one of the most active teams in free agency so far this year. So to see Vic Beasley's very prominent name pop up on their potential negotiation list, I, for one, am excited because I think they're going to make a move and try and bring him up north, which is possibly the best possible place that Beasley could land. He obviously was not cutting it at the NFL level prior to or after the 2016 season, but he's clearly talented. I'm not quite sure what happened in Tennessee other than my theory that he might have had an undisclosed injury. But even if that's the case, what happened with the Raiders? Why did he not get another chance after that? Was it just that bad in Tennessee? I'm not sure what the behind the scenes news is on that, but what I do know is that Beasley is the type of player that goes up to the CFL and flashes on tape from day one, which is exactly what I expect him to do with Ottawa. I think he would be the type of player who would seize a starting job immediately and watch as he developed a hybrid defensive end slash linebacker role in their defense. Uh, Primarily slated as a designated pass rusher, which is what he should have been in the NFL to begin with. However, I don't think that he necessarily will use this as a leaping board back to the NFL, given that he's nearing the age where he's probably just looking for a career that he can stick with. And I honestly think the CFL is the place for him. They have wider hash marks, which will benefit his style of play. He can line up wider than he normally would on an NFL field and bend the edge and use his speed to beat tackles that are arguably a lower caliber of player than he was playing against in the NFL level. It would not shock me to see him put up dominant statistical seasons in Ottawa, perhaps even touching double-digit sacks on multiple seasons. Um, I honestly don't think he'll ever pop back on an NFL radar, but I wouldn't be shocked to see them take a chance on him after a strong season in the CFL either. So it remains to be seen what happens in this situation, but I, for one, think that Vic Beasley should entertain this very, very seriously and come up to the CFL and dominate like he can with his skill set and simply move forward as a CFL player for the rest of his career. Like I said, it remains to be seen what he does, what Ottawa decides to do, but It'll be fun to see, regardless what happens in 2022 with everything they've done so far. That's all I've got for you today. Thanks for watching the video. Once again, please remember that I have a partnership with Seat Geek. You can get $20 off any purchase by using my code SamShady at checkout. That goes for CFL tickets if you're going to go check out an Ottawa game this season, or if you're in America, that covers all the NFL games as well. So check it out. Also, I'd like to thank my other partners, eBay Motors and Amazon Music. You'll be able to find their links in below the video. And CFL News Hub, as always, for letting me write this stuff and follow the CFL and get paid to do it. Um, as always, check out all your CFL news on CFL News Hub and have a great rest of your day. I hope you enjoyed the content. Drop a like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned for more football content of every league, USFL, NFL, CFL, FCF, whatever it might be. If there's news to cover, I will be covering it. Thank you.